Welcome. And Teresa, do we have any guests online?
Yes, we have Phil Eskew is visiting from the Sunrise Rotary Club, and I believe Barry Rubin is also a guest.
Thank you, guests, and welcome to our club. And if you're interested in learning more about Rotary, talk to some of these Rotarians at your table. They'll be glad to fill in the details. We have some birthdays to celebrate. Sally Gaskell is going to have her birthday on the 22nd, obviously. Mary Getzey had her birthday on the 20th. Leslie Green coming up on the 27th, and Lynn Tiemann on the 23rd. We have some Rotary anniversaries too. Bill Brown, 3 years, and Judy Witt, 35 years. Congratulations to all of you. I'd like to thank Alon Barker for covering for me for the last 2 weeks. I grew up in Iowa, and this is called a January thaw when it gets above freezing, so enjoy the weather today. The Lunch Buddies is on the table, the sheet, so check that out. It's a great way to meet and associate with your colleagues from Rotary. Have some announcements. First of all, Noah Yeager, a graduate of West Point, is our new global scholar. He's interviewed so well last Saturday, and he's a graduate of Bloomington South. Fine young man, will represent Rotary very well. Also, Judy Schroeder asked me to remind you that on January 28th, and she gave me the show and tell, on January 28th at Judy's house at 7 p.m., there'll be a book club talking about Heather's book, 100 Things to Do in Bloomington Before You Die. So, please let Judy know if you're going to participate. Also, it's time for a Paul Harris recognition. We have several today, and Mike promised he would be brief, although this is an important part of our organization. We have several people coming up to participate in the pinning of the Paul Harris Award.
Thank you, President Ron. Today we have a new crop of Paul Harris Fellows to recognize. All of these current club members have contributed to support Rotary International with contributions and dedication to our club, service above self, community service work. And only one of them sent me a file photo. Winston. There we go. Okay. That sort of reminded me of Winston. So anyway, I didn't get anything from anybody else. How's everybody's weekend? Did you have a good weekend? Mine was great. Well, that's the wrong photo. Never mind. This is what happens if you don't obey the four-way test. So anyway, he is my nephew anyway. So today we have these people. I'd like for them to come up. Gus Kalis to be his first Paul Harris Fellow. Gus, could you join us up here? Yolando Trevino, Martha Wales, Leslie Green, Lauren Snyder, and Winston Schindel. And then I need some help from some pinners that I've selected to help me today. Grab a name. This probably out here, I'm guessing. So, quite a lineup. Okay, so first of all, Gus, you're our newest member to achieve Paul Harris Fellow with a pin in recognition. Leslie, this will be your Paul Harris +1 pin. Martha, Paul Harris +2. Yolanda, my foundation committee person in cohort, this will be your Paul Harris +3 pin. And now we have Lauren Snyder and Winston Schindel, each receiving their +6 pin. So let's have everybody rise, and please help me in congratulating our newest Paul Harris Fellows. Yep. Wherever. Yep. Oh. Thank you, Lynn.
I think there's 6 of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and congratulations to our newest Paul Harris Fellows. I'd like to have all of the Paul Harris Fellows in the room stand to be recognized. Thank you to all of you. Now we have new member installation, which is always an exciting part of our club. Tracy and your team.
Thank you, President Ron. And if we could have Claudia and Lori come on up over to the right. I actually get to sponsor 2 of my favorite female friends here that I've been courting for a little while. And then Jeff will be giving the introduction, the formal introductions to all of you. And then, of course, Earon will read the induction verbiage. So, Jeff.
Welcome. So let me start with Claudia Avellaneda. She is a Paul H. O'Neill Professor and Fisher Faculty Fellow at IU's O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs. She is an elected fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. Her research focuses on investigating the factors influencing the performance of subnational governments in Latin American countries. She has published several books and articles exploring the role of mayors and governors' education and experience in explaining governmental performance. She joined the IU faculty in 2013 after serving as assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and graduate coordinator of Latin American Studies at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. At the O'Neill School, she served as chair of the Governance and Management faculty group and currently oversees Latin American initiatives. She was a fellow at Stanford University Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Science. Claudia is a Colombian American citizen who grew up in Colombia. She served as lieutenant on reserve of the Colombian Army for 6 years. In 2000, she moved to the United States to earn her master's and PhD degrees in political science from Texas A&M University. One of the goals she is accomplishing is internationalizing IU education by offering and facilitating training and education opportunities to Latin Americans and public servants. Lori Garrity, dear friend for 8 years, so glad to be doing this for both of you, of course, but Lori Garrity has lived in Bloomington longer than anywhere in her life. Growing up a military brat, Lori attended 9 schools and lived across the U.S. and overseas before attending college. Graduate school brought her to Bloomington, and she has resided here ever since. She has been affiliated with the O'Neill School, or SPIA, as some of you know, since 2006 as a student, adjunct faculty member, and staff person. Prior to working at O'Neill, she worked as development director for United Way of Monroe County and Stonebelt ARC. She has volunteered with Middle Way House, Habitat for Humanity, Community Kitchen, the Bloomington Playwrights Project, Hoosier Hills Food Bank, Quarryland Men's Chorus, Stonebelt ARC, and Off Night Productions. Lori also enjoys working as a local freelance stage manager. Most recently, she stage managed a number of performances such as Matilda, Newsies, the fall and spring ballets at the Jacob School of Music, and Potpourri at the IU African American Arts Institute. She received her master's in public affairs from IU and her bachelor's degree from George Mason University. In her spare time, Lori enjoys reading, cooking, spending time with friends, attempting to garden, and most of all, traveling the world with her husband of 23 years, Preston, and she does great Facebook postings. Welcome.
Lori Garrity, and Claudia Avellaneda. On behalf of the board and membership of the Bloomington Rotary Club, it is a great pleasure to welcome you and your organization as the newest members of our club. We look forward to the fellowship that we will share, as well as your participation in the club projects that make our club, community, and country and world a better place. Though Rotary is not a political organization, Rotarians are vitally concerned with good citizenship and the election of effective leaders to public office. While Rotary is not a religious organization, it is built on those highest principles that have served as a moral compass for people throughout the ages. Rotary is an organization of business, professional, and community leaders pledged to withhold the highest ethical and moral standards. Rotarians believe that worldwide fellowship and peace can be achieved when people work together and uphold the Rotary motto of service above self. Rotary activities exemplify the partnership, respect, and generosity that one would expect from people who believe they have a responsibility to help others. Lori and Claudia, you have been chosen for membership in the Bloomington Club because your fellow members believe you to be leaders in our community, and because you possess the qualities to champion the messages and principles of Rotary. You are representatives of your vocation and talents within our club and community. You have both now become ambassadors of Bloomington Rotary, carrying the ideals of service to all within your sphere of influence. Our community will know and judge Rotary by your character and service. We'll also look to you for inspiration as we strive to become better Rotarians. We will now pin you with the distinguished badge of Rotarian, your Rotary pin. We ask that you wear your Rotary pin with pride in your many endeavors and as a symbol of our recognition of your contribution toward a better world through your Rotary membership. Fellow Rotarians, please rise if you are able and welcome our newest Rotarians, Lori Garrity and Claudia Avellaneda. Photos now. Welcome. Welcome.
Yeah, one together and then one at a time. No. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
My challenge to all of my Rotarian colleagues is to reach out and get to know our new members. Our membership committee has done a fantastic job this year. We have a lot of new members. In fact, we lead the district in new members, but our role is to make them feel comfortable. Now, our outstanding co-program chair, Michael Shermus, will introduce our program.
I've always found my Jewish identity a challenge because there are many things that I find problematic about my heritage, both historically and with current events. In my late 20s and early 30s, I explored that in depth by studying Jewish-Christian relations, interdenominational cooperation, and anti-Jewishness when I was working on my master's in religious studies at Indiana University. But I moved away from focusing on religion when I found that my talents weren't best suited for the academic world, too slow and ponderous for a man of action. Anyway, I say this all as a preface to how interested I was that Earon Davis did a book on anti-Jewishness. And since it was suggested by the program committee that we have a speaker in this area, he was an obvious choice. Now, one of the things I like most about Earon, and there are many, and it must be because I'm a trained philosopher, is that Earon is so thoughtful. Actually, one of the more thoughtful people that I know. He wrestles with his topics in his book in a way that is refreshing. One of the things that stood out from his book is a paragraph that summed it up for me and is reflective of part of the title of his presentation day. It's complicated. It is complicated. To paraphrase him, Jewishness is not determined by specific religious beliefs or any particular view of God or any God at all. Jews range from totally secular and very cultural to deeply fundamental. Earon does a good job of explaining it all. I think you'll find his talk interesting and illuminating. He's a hell of a nice guy, so I'm particularly gratified that I'm allowed the opportunity to introduce one of Rotary's own to present on a topic that is near and dear to his heart, enough so that he produced an impressive volume on this topic. And now for the standard info. Earon Davis is a transdisciplinary researcher and a writer, retired lawyer, and a professor, an award-winning public and environmental health advocate and nonprofit professional. He was born to a working-class Jewish family in Chicago with immigrant grandparents. Earon's education is in sociology, law, and public health. He has served as a consultant, project manager, journalist, hearing officer, executive director, integrative health practitioner, and board member, having parented 3 children while working part-time. Earon and his wife, Martha, another Rotary stalwart, have lived in Bloomington, Indiana since 2012. Earon has taught at IU and Purdue Global. He belongs to the Bloomington Rotary Club, including being the past president, Congregation Beth Shalom, the local NAACP chapter, and UU congregation with additional interfaith peace building and community activities, including the Rotary Action Group for Peace. Without further ado, Earon Davis.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. It's working? Okay. Hello, fellow Rotarians. This is my first public presentation on my lived experience as a Jewish American. For several reasons, I was compelled to dig into my own identity and the meaning of Jewishness to myself and to the world. I wrote a book just intending to do the tons of required reading and to sort out my own Jewish identity in the context of my life in Bloomington. Somehow, writing and being in Bloomington have given me a safer context in which to feel Jewish, while keeping a low profile about it. Being a Rotarian has helped me develop skills and perspectives essential to what I'm trying to accomplish as a Jew in the world. This presentation, like myself and the world around us, is complicated. It is especially challenging for me to prepare and present this talk in a role for which I'm completely inexperienced. I am Jewish and I've written about Jewishness, but it is difficult to stand before you as a Jewish person, knowing the history of the Jewish people and seeing the rising anti-Semitism around the world, especially at many college campuses. I am here not to justify my existence or that of the Jewish people, but to explore it with you. So first, how do I? First, gratitude. That's the core of everything. So I'm grateful for Rotary International and our district, 6580, the Bloomington Rotary Club, Club President Ron Barnes, Club Program Committee Co-Chair Michael Shermis, Technology Assistance with Tyler, friends and fellow members, including our Diversity Committee and the NAACP. So thank you all for being here, in person or on Zoom. Hey, Barry. I'm going to begin with a thought that since Jewish people are a tiny minority, 0.2% in a world dominated by Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, and atheist ideologies, There's no reason for the world to understand Jewishness. And when we don't understand something, we tend to fill the gaps with stereotypes built on assumptions, biases, and prejudices. And those are the same attributes that perpetuate anti-Jewishness. My engagement with racial justice work has definitely helped inform my search for answers. Today, we have a clearer understanding of human nature and cognitive biases than we had in the past. After talking about some basic concepts, I will give examples of the reasons why most people do not understand Jewishness and how those same reasons help to explain anti-Jewishness itself. Okay, so I have a disclaimer. This presentation in my book are my thoughts. They're not representing anyone else. I am not a Jewish studies professor, and I'm not a rabbi. And in a way, I think that that's precisely one of the major qualifications for my research and what I'm talking about. That I'm just not bound by institutional and theological restrictions. I'm here observing the world and my life, and seeing what makes sense. So I don't believe it's possible to understand or address anti-Jewishness without understanding what it is to be Jewish. And along those lines, I reversed some order of slides somehow. I use the concept of transdisciplinarity. So it really is based on the idea that you can't know anything for absolutely certain unless you know everything. And we don't do that. So we're guessing. A lot of the stuff we're just pulling out of our heads. So like systems thinking, transdisciplinarity is a way of thinking critically, a way to bring more information, perspective, and more stakeholders into the conversation. The aim is to understand things and processes in ways that include as many people as possible. Put in another way, our larger reality is comprised of everything, all disciplines, all peoples, all regions. That's our reality. Thus, the context for understanding anything pretty much requires that we understand, or at least leave room for, everything. My childhood memories. So why did I write a book on anti-Jewishness? I'm Jewish, and my family has been Jewish for centuries, if not millennia. I experienced being hated for being a Jew from childhood on. At the age of around 7, I was walking in our local park, and a neighbor boy shoved me to the ground and said that I was a dirty kike and a piece of shit. That was confusing to me because I didn't know what either word meant. I asked my mother, she wouldn't answer. Neither would my father when he returned home from work. Both were upset, but didn't know what to say. I finally asked my grandfather, who was a Chicago cab driver and lived nearby, and he gently told me. That was baffling to me, and perhaps is what triggered my quest to understand bigotry. I also soon attended Hebrew school after public school during the week and on Sundays. Often my brother and I were harassed on our way home from Hebrew school, especially during the winter when it would always be dark already. Growing up in a working class Jewish neighborhood in Chicago, I saw these signs on the right in my neighborhood. Every year, they were there announcing the commemoration of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. In my neighborhood, the signs were predominantly in Yiddish, which was commonly spoken there. I grew up hearing Jew jokes in school. One that bothered me the most was, what's the difference between a loaf of bread and a Jewish baby? A loaf of bread doesn't scream when you throw it in the oven. So why do I use the term anti-Jewish rather than anti-Semitic? First of all, just for some basic things like accuracy, lack of ambiguity, and the literal meaning. Anti-Semitism is an arcane term that was coined by a German race agitator, Wilhelm Marr, in 1879 to express the racial hatred for Jewish people, regardless of their practiced religion or belief. By avoiding direct reference to Jewishness, the term attempts to dilute or obscure its harsh purpose, its hateful purpose. It began as a direct attempt to thwart Christian respect for the Jewish roots of Christianity. So the term, which literally refers to a number of Middle Eastern languages, is imprecise and obscure, both overly specific and underspecific. Both Jews and Arabs are Semitic peoples, so the term has been used to disrespect all Middle Eastern people. Ambiguity is a distraction we do not need, in the opinion of a growing number of people, including Michael Shermas. Anti-Semitism has meanings that today are vague and obtuse to many, especially younger people. This distracts from the experience and history of actual Jewish people. So sort of summarizing, the term Semitic refers to language groupings from the Middle East. Its literal meaning is unrelated to Jewishness. The term has been used for about 160 years, and today it essentially means hatred or prejudice towards Jewish people as a group, but it literally applies to any Middle Eastern group. So its actual meaning isn't anti-Jewish. It's anti-Semitic, which doesn't really mean much. So having ambiguity, equivocation are things that really aren't very helpful. Another term that some use to replace anti-Semitism is Jew hatred. This is the, you have a copy at your table, the Anti-Defamation League has a pyramid of hate. And I think what's important is that violent acts may imply hatred, but the base of bias and stereotypes is often unintended and based on ignorance rather than hate. The Anti-Defamation League they developed this pyramid of hate. But what I see as most important is that the vast bulk of bias does not require hate. And I think we learned this when we started to deal with racism. It doesn't require hate. However, when the bias becomes systemic and reinforced, it easily escalates into acts of discrimination, acts of hate, and even genocide. By the way, the Anti-Defamation League was founded in 1913 after the lynching of Leo Frank, a Jewish man in Atlanta, Georgia, for a crime that is widely considered there was no way he committed. So then, what is Jewishness? I see it as a collection of diverse identities, people, beliefs, communities, and traditions, not just a specific religion. So what did your ancestors believe and do 3,000 years ago? Think about that. What language did they speak? Probably wasn't English. The Jewish people had a primitive, earth-based religion and civilization that were fully integrated into their culture and lifestyles. One could know of holidays or the start of the day by looking at the phases of the moon or the sun and the seasons, not needing a clock or a printed calendar. This still holds true today for many traditionalists. It is also deeply mystical for many and deeply rational and practical for many at the same time. So you get the lunar calendar, the holidays begin at sunset. Shabbat is a day of rest without technology or work. The seasons are celebrated, including Passover in the spring and Sukkot, the harvest festival in the fall. A new year for trees is celebrated in the winter. Plants native to Israel are especially celebrated and used in rituals. So we got a primitive earth-based religion and civilization. Those kinds of things haven't fared too well in the modern world. So historically, the ancient earth-based civilization is over 3,500 years old. The land in which the Jewish civilization is founded is based and includes the present Israel, as well as Judea and Samaria, which were renamed the West Bank by Jordan from 1948 to 1967, as well as additional parts of Jordan and other countries. In 1948, Israel accepted the United Nations partition of the British Mandate, Palestine. There was going to be a Palestinian Jewish state and a Palestinian Arab state. Palestinian Arabs and the Arab world rejected the partition and invaded the newly declared Jewish state in 1948. The Jewish state remains. It was, I'm sorry, this is difficult, it's complicated. So the Jewish settlement, Palestinians accepted the state that the United Nations offered, and they proceeded to create a nation. Has the modern world had any problems with other ancient religions and civilizations? Have any survived and centuries later reestablished themselves as a viable nation, including reviving their original native language? That is a question. Jewishness, though, is also very modern, liberal, and technologically advanced, with very successful innovations and high-tech entrepreneurs. Israel, like Jewish people, is both secular and religious, communal and high-tech, modest and flashy. Jewishness is also both alien and familiar. While acknowledged as foundational to Christianity and Islam, the history of Christian and Islam proselytizing and prejudice leaves Jewishness as an alien other, an afterthought. So there are competing frames of reference, which lead to the lack of understanding. So some of these items include Jewishness is historically much older than Christianity and Islam, both of which intended to replace Jewishness. The Jewish people were monotheist and rejected idolatry before almost any other group. They also rejected Christianity and Islam. They rejected and fought both the Roman and Greek empires, which are the foundation for European civilization. Conflict of interest there. By the time Christianity merged into the Roman Empire, the Jewish people had lost devastating wars and were expelled, enslaved, and murdered, most survivors living in diaspora outside of Israel. Unlike early Christianity and Islam, which are based on beliefs and do not require literacy, the average Jewish male had to be literate and engage in critical studies. Living in diaspora also required learning additional languages and cultural literacy to understand and interact with the people around you. So surviving as a distinct group, a mistrusted minority, required critical thinking and negotiating skills. Jewishness and the Jewish religion are not based in specific religious beliefs, but in diverse community and action. So the Jewish religion holds that non-Jews do not need to be converted or saved. Anyone with religion or not can be a righteous person. But one of the aspects of the Jewish experience is the historical presence of persecution, genocide, and second-class citizenship. So Jewishness is very different from Christianity or Islam. If one's model for a religion is supremacist, like everybody really needs to join us, or creedal, based on specific beliefs, and the only path to salvation, one would tend to attribute those qualities to other religions, even if that isn't the case in the sense of Jewishness. So Jewish people are of different skin colors, ethnicities, politics, experiences of trauma, religious beliefs, personality, cultural affinity, immigrant generation, and economic class. There are just so many differences that make up this group of Jewish people around the world. So what is it? It can be a religion, a race, several related cultures, an ancient civilization, a peoplehood, an ethnicity, or an ancient tribal nation. It's sort of all of those things. Some of those, it depends on the person. As a diverse realm of practices and beliefs, Jewishness has evolved tremendously over its 3,500-year history, and it continues to evolve today. So some of the diversity are in very different cultural groups. So we have Sephardic people, Ashkenazic, Mizrahi, African, Asian, African-American, Marranos, and Cryptos. There are so many different expulsions. Some of the people who were expelled from Israel by the Romans or the Byzantines or the Babylonians went around the Middle East and North Africa. They remained in the region, Middle East and North Africa. Some went to Spain or other northern Mediterranean countries, and some went into Europe. So I need to give a little short shrift on some of this. But there are a lot of Black Jews, there are a lot of Asian Jews. It's really complicated. So when you try to simplify everything into a statement, a racial statement especially, then that's very disturbing to me, the racialization of people's ethnicity and relationships today. I don't think that's productive. So the diversity of observance runs the whole gamut of things. I mean, from ultra-Orthodox to Orthodox, Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative, Buddhist. There's some of the major American proponents of Buddhism have Jewish backgrounds. John Kabat-Zinn, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, Leonard Cohen, Ram Dass. And also Zionism is a feature of, that's very dominant in Jewishness. But there are also anti-Zionists in any of these movements. So it's not just a big tent, it's just crazy big. So Judaism is an ancient earth-based religion anchored to the Middle East. The Jewish people are around 0.2% of the world population. There's a wide range of beliefs from Hasidism to totally secular or atheist. Beliefs are far less important than what one does. And until 1948, there was no Jewish nation. Now there is one. Jews do not proselytize because Judaism is not supremacist. Jewish people who lived in almost every land on earth and have lived in the Middle East for thousands of years. The vast majority were murdered, enslaved, deported by Babylonians, 550 BCE. And of those, the vast majority remaining were murdered, expelled, or enslaved by Rome by 135 CE. Most Jewish people were forced out of Israel and fled to other countries in the Middle East, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Another thing that's very different is that the tribal affiliation of religion in Judaism is passed from the mother rather than the father. Children born out of wedlock, for example, still have legitimacy within the community, even if the father is unknown or unacknowledged. The idea is that it is easier to know who the mother of a child is than the father. Practical. Jewishness works very different from dominating majority religions in which the religion is determined by the father. Still, even in Jewish cultures, inheritance of property is patrilineal, and patriarchy is still powerful. However, in the Jewish world, we know that women are our future. Their lineage, their history is not erased through marriage, because the woman's family traditions and practices are the grounding of their own family and household. Patriarchy is powerful, to be sure, but on average, probably less exclusively so than in patrilineal religions. Being literate long before the world started to develop literacy provided Jewish people with a huge advantage in all walks of life, maybe except farming. It may well be said that much of the history of anti-Jewishness relates to fear based on the fact that the Jewish people were more educated and able to deal with complex topics in analytical rather than only intuitive ways. And there's been some research into this, into the economics. So why Jewish people have tended to be successful out of proportion. So this book, The Chosen Few, on the economic history, traces the relative success of Jewish people by the 1400s to literacy, which became required of Jewish male adults and children as an adaptation to being in diaspora after the destruction of the Second Temple. Being able to study Torah and then Talmud generated complex critical thinking skills, and reading in one language made it easier to learn other languages, which was uncommon among the average people until a few hundred years ago. I also want to note here, it's another article by Niall Ferguson, that universities are not always bastions of freedom and liberty. In fact, educational institutions have been vital to the development and rise of fascism, and also imploded and corrupted to promote collectivism. And this book, The Third Reich in the Ivory Tower, is a real authoritative look at how the Ivy League in particular was very pro-fascist in many ways. There's also opposition to it, but it was definitely anti-Jewish. So we know how anti-Jewishness is manifested, and I think I just want to mention how difficult it is to confront conspiracy theories. They're passed down from generation to generations. They're part of our culture, part of our history. Others, and some are created by social and political movements today, like QAnon. I mean, it's just conspiracy theories, alternative truths. They get passed from neighbor to neighbor, and when society is vulnerable, because it's in turmoil in some important ways, economic, social, cultural, it seems to rise. It seems to, trigger a movement, a need to explain things in simple terms. And again, bias is sometimes explicit, but it's also implicit and unconscious, embedded in our cultures. And conflict and anger, don't help. when confronted directly with the truth, a true believer in a conspiracy theory will not retreat, they'll double down. This is something that we've seen in our society in larger sense in the political realm. I need to just ask this question, answer this question. Are Jews white? Well, Black people who are Jewish, Asian people who are Jewish, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, you're usually not going to call white. But yet that is a very popular categorization, stereotype. A large majority of Israeli people are not Ashkenazi. They are from the Middle East. They're Mizrahi. Their families were thrown out of the Arab world and North Africa, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's a fact, but it's not something that's really seems to be considered today. Another aspect of the racial issue is like, how can Jewish people not be white if Jewish people from Russia and the Russian Empire look white? Well, there's some history going on and some anthropology that is enlightening the world very gradually. Nina Jablonski is a member of the National Academy of Sciences. And she has found that the environment, basically, that skin color is an adaptation that people make over a period of even as little as 2,000 years when they move from one part of the world to another. So if you consider that, if Jesus's brother had been forced out and moved to Norway, or let's say even Russia, today they would look white. You may need to look at this resource, but it's really important that the latitude, longitude, the exposure to the sun really impacts a lot of the skin color. And that does change over time, long periods of time. So I do want to add that I see race as a divisive and deadly social construct, and it's not scientifically valid. So to me, concepts like white privilege, white fragility, and whiteness serve ideological purposes in the agenda, and even very well intended. But they racialize and colorize people into categories with the result of stereotyping and shaming. There's no science to support the idea that shaming, blaming, and stereotyping any group of people, even a perceived majority, lead to productive social change. To the contrary, it tends to entrench differences and increase resistance to the desired evolutions and changes. So I refer to Rotary's four-way test, which is based in the philosophy that says that individuals and relationships to community are vital. To be sure, some in society might see Rotary itself as privileged and therefore white supremacist, yet are racializing stereotypes the truth? Are they fair to all concerned? Does it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? So, Jewishness and anti-Jewishness are diverse and complex, but capable of being better understood. However, can we all function without bigotry, without understanding Jewishness itself and the changing global context in which we all live today? We cannot blame all anti-Jewishness on social media and confirmation bias or embedded cultural memes in the Christian and atheist cultures of the West or the Muslim cultures of the Middle East. Yet we do need to contend with both the biased cultures and the rapid spread of anti-Jewishness due to social media in the world today. So, thank you. The hard one.
Thank you very much. It's going to help us all with our understanding of Jewishness, and I appreciate Aaron's talks today. And by the way, he'll be around if you have questions. I don't think we have time to have questions from the floor today, but I'm sure Earon will be staying to do that. And in honor of his presentation, we will be making a donation to a service organization and club in Bloomington that will be named in a drawing next week. So we will take care of that next week. I do want to thank all of you who really helped in this meeting today. Our greeter, Charles Pierce, our introductions by Hank Walder, our Zoom host by Teresa Clare, our reflection by the chili cook-off master, Earon Brewington, our reporter, Greer Carson. We didn't have a mic today, so I'll still thank you, Tracy, for your work, and Tyler Martin Nichols for your work. Our next meeting will be in the Frangipani room, and we'll hear from the Chancellor of Ivy Tech, Eric Coyne. And that ought to be a very interesting meeting too. Please stand and join me in the four-way test. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, to all concerned. Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Fifth, is it fun? Have a good week.